Look at this crusty, worn-out piece of ghetto garbage, Brody Vance roared, his voice echoing off the high, mirrored walls of the gym as he took a box cutter and savagely sliced open a boy's brand-new boxing glove, tossing the ruined leather straight into a nearby trash can. The reigning middleweight champion then turned his icy, arrogant gaze toward an elderly black couple standing shivering near the doorway. With a cruel, twisted smirk, he pulled a thick, tightly wrapped brick of cashier's checks from his satin robe and waved it inches from the old man's face. "You want a refund for your pathetic grandkid? Tell you what, old man, you land just one clean shot on my chin, and this $100,000 is yours. But if you miss, you admit to everyone on this camera that your whole black bloodline is weak, slow, and built to serve men like me. Look at your wrinkly, dark skin you look like. You belong in a welfare line picking cotton, not standing on my high-end mats. In fact, why don't you both drop to your knees right now and clean the dust off my boots with your shirts like the worthless trash you are?" Brody threw his head back, laughing hysterically, completely unaware that his veteran head trainer had just locked eyes with the elderly couple's feet, his face turning pale as he recognized a legendary synchronization of footwork that shattered everything the champion believed about power. My friends, you cannot afford to miss a single second of this jaw-dropping story of hidden legends and ultimate poetic justice. Before we reveal the unbelievable twist that followed, take a brief moment right now to drop your current location and local time in the comments section below and gently hit that subscribe button to join our community for more powerful human stories. Let us begin. The historic city of Savannah, Georgia, is known for its beautiful cobblestone streets, its weeping willow trees draped in Spanish moss, and a deep sense of Southern tradition. But on the eastern edge of the city, away from the scenic tourist spots, stood the Vance Iron Boxing Academy. It was a massive, ultra-luxury facility made of concrete, tinted glass, and polished steel. Inside, the air conditioning hummed tightly, cutting through the thick Georgia humidity, smelling of expensive leather, chemically treated canvas, and pure, unfiltered male ego. This gym belonged to Brody the Executioner Vance, the 3-3-year-old, reigning middleweight boxing champion of the world. Brody was a man built like a statue of granite, standing 6 feet 2 inches tall, with a blinding white smile that he used for corporate sponsorships, and cold, predatory blue eyes that saw human beings as nothing more than stepping stones for his social media metrics. His face was plastered on billboards across the state, a symbol of modern success, wealth, and absolute athletic dominance. 6 miles away, in a quiet neighborhood, where the asphalt on the roads was cracked and the paint on the porch railings was peeling, lived Arthur and Martha Jenkins. They were a sweet, soft-spoken black couple, both 68 years old, who had been married for nearly half a century. Together, they ran a tiny, weathered neighborhood grocery store called Jenkins Corner Provisions. Arthur was a man of few words, his hands calloused from moving heavy wooden crates of fresh produce for 40 years, his posture slightly curved from a lifetime of hard, honest physical labor. Martha was the heartbeat of the neighborhood, always wearing a faded floral apron, her graying hair kept in a neat, elegant bun. She knew every child in the community by name, and she never hesitated to slip an extra apple or a loaf of bread into the bag of a customer who was short on cash. They lived a quiet, invisible life of dignity, completely removed from the flashy, high-stakes world of professional sports. The center of their universe was their 17-year-old grandson, Malik. Malik was a tall, skinny boy with wide, hungry eyes and a gentle soul. For the past 2 years, while other kids played video games or loitered on the street corners, Malik spent his afternoons watching boxing tutorials on YouTube. Specifically, he watched Brody Vance's channel. To Malik, the champion's blinding hand speed and ruthless footwork looked like magic. Malik wanted desperately to learn how to protect himself, to build a body that wouldn't flinch, and to make his grandparents proud. For 8 long months, Malik washed cars in the blistering Georgia heat, saving every single dollar bill, every $5 bill, and every shiny quarter, until he had exactly $450, the precise cost of a 1-month elite youth training membership at Vance Iron Boxing Academy. On a bright Monday afternoon, Malik put on his brand new red training shirt, packed his bag, and walked through the glass doors of the academy, his heart pounding with pure pride. He walked up to the front desk, handed over his hard-earned cash, and stepped onto the pristine gym floor, ready to learn. But his dream lasted less than 20 minutes. Brody Vance was in the middle of a heavy bag workout when he noticed Malik standing near the ring, waiting for a trainer. Brody stopped, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Malik's skinny frame, his worn-out sneakers, and the dark color of his skin. To a billionaire champion, who only associated with high society elites, Malik looked like an eyesore in his luxury facility. Brody walked over, his heavy boots thudding against the floor, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Hey kid," Brody called out, his voice loud enough to make the entire gym go completely silent. "Who told you that you could bring that ghetto energy into my facility? You look like you belong in a juvenile detention center, not a championship ring." Malik froze, his face burning with intense embarrassment, as dozens of older, wealthy fighters stopped their workouts to look. I paid the fee at the desk, sir," Malik whispered, his voice trembling as he held up his registration receipt. "I saved up $450. I just want to learn how to box." Brody burst into a harsh, mocking laugh. He grabbed a cold bottle of neon blue energy drink from a nearby cooler, took a sip, and then deliberately poured the sticky, colorful liquid directly onto his own pristine, custom-made white leather boxing shoes. The liquid splashed onto the floor, staining the floor. "Oops," Brody sneered, his eyes turning vicious. "Look what you made me do with your ugly presence. Tell you what, kid, if you want to stay in my gym, you need to learn your place. Drop down on your knees right now. Take that cheap new shirt off your back and wipe my shoes clean. Do it right now, or get the hell out of my sight." Malik stood rooted to the spot, his chest heaving as hot tears stung the corners of his eyes. The entire room erupted into a wave of cruel, loud laughter. Nobody stepped forward to help him. Nobody defended him. Malik looked down at his shoes, then turned around, grabbed his gym bag, and ran out of the glass doors as fast as his legs could carry him, the sound of the champion's mocking laughter ringing in his ears. When he arrived home, he didn't say a word to Arthur or Martha. He ran straight into his small bedroom, locked the door, and threw himself face first onto his mattress, weeping silently in the dark, his dignity entirely shattered by a man the world called a hero. The heavy Georgia rain began to fall at 4:30 p.m. on Thursday, tapping a steady, rhythmic beat against the tin roof of the Jenkins household. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly quiet. For 3 full days, Malik had remained locked in his bedroom, refusing to eat his favorite meals, refusing to speak, his spirit completely hollowed out. He had hidden his ruined red training shirt in the back of his closet, but a grandmother's eyes see everything. Martha had found the stained shirt, and after hours of gentle, patient knocking, Malik had finally opened the door. He sat on the edge of his bed, his head hanging low, his voice cracking as he recounted every single word Brody Vance had yelled at him, how he had been called ghetto garbage, how his race had been mocked, and how he had been ordered to drop to his knees to clean a billionaire's shoes. As Malik spoke, Arthur Jenkins sat silently in a wooden rocking chair in the corner of the room. He didn't interrupt, he didn't shout, but his large, calloused hands gripped the armrests of the chair so tightly that the old wood began to creak under the immense pressure. His jaw was clenched into a tight, hard line, his breathing slow and heavy. It was a terrifyingly deep, historical silence. The kind of silence that comes from a man who had witnessed the ugliest parts of the world and had spent 40 years trying to protect his family from it. When Malik finished speaking, Arthur stood up slowly, his joints popping. He didn't look at his grandson. Instead, he walked out of the bedroom, and climbed the creaky wooden stairs up to the dark, dusty attic. Martha followed him silently, her face set in a grim, determined expression. In the furthest corner of the attic, sitting beneath a single hanging light bulb, was a heavy, old wooden trunk made of cedar, locked with a rusted iron padlock. Arthur pulled a small brass key from a chain around his neck, a key he hadn't used in over 45 years. He inserted the key, turned it with a sharp click, and slowly lifted the heavy lid. Inside, resting on top of yellowed newspapers from the late 1970s, were two pairs of weathered, deeply cracked leather boxing shoes. One pair was high-top black leather, the other was a smaller white leather pair. Beside them lay a pair of faded red silk boxing trunks with the faded letters USA stitched down the side. Arthur reached into the trunk, his fingers gently brushing the cracked leather of the shoes. He didn't pick them up, he just stared at them for a long, agonizing minute. The memories flashed behind his eyes like lightning, the roar of stadium crowds, the blinding camera flashes, the feeling of absolute invincibility, and the sudden, crushing weight of a corrupt, racially biased athletic committee that had stripped him of his future in 1978, forcing him into a lifetime of quiet anonymity. He had buried that life. He had sworn never to look at it again. But now, the world had come for his grandson. Arthur closed the lid of the wooden trunk with a firm, decisive thud. He turned to Martha, his voice low and steady, vibrating with an ancient power. "Get your coat, Martha. We are going to that academy." Martha didn't question him. She simply nodded, her eyes flashing with a fierce, protective maternal fire. "I'll get my purse, Arthur. It's time we get that boy his money back and his apology." They left Malik at home, telling him to stay inside. Arthur put on his finest Sunday clothes, a pressed gray tweed suit that he only wore to church, and a matching flat cap. Martha wore her neat, navy blue Sunday dress with a string of imitation pearls around her neck. They looked like an ordinary, elderly African-American couple heading to an early dinner, completely out of place in the modern, fast-paced world. They climbed into their old, battered 1998 silver pickup truck, the engine groaning as Arthur turned the key. The windshield wipers slapped furiously against the heavy downpour as they drove the 6 miles toward the eastern edge of the city. Neither of them spoke during the entire drive. The silence between them was not filled with fear. It was filled with absolute, unwavering purpose. They knew exactly what kind of monster they were going to confront. They knew that a man like Brody Vance, surrounded by millions of dollars, luxury sports cars, and worshipful fans, considered himself a god. They knew he looked down on people who looked like them, treating their dignity as a joke. At exactly 5:15 p.m., the old silver pickup truck pulled into the immaculate, freshly paved parking lot of the Vance Iron Boxing Academy, parking right next to a line of shiny, black European sports cars. The rain was pouring harder now, creating a thick sheet of gray water across the asphalt. Arthur stepped out of the truck, holding a large black umbrella over Martha as she stepped down. Together, side by side, their shoulders straight and their heads held high, the elderly couple walked toward the glowing glass entrance of the luxury gym. They pushed the heavy doors open, the chime of the bell cut through by the loud, thumping bass of hip-hop music playing over the gym's state-of-the-art sound system. They walked into the lion's den, not as victims, but as protectors, ready to face whatever cruelty awaited them. The interior of the Vance Iron Boxing Academy was buzzing with intense energy when Arthur and Martha Jenkins stepped inside. The gym was packed with wealthy white clients, young, aggressive fighters, and several local sports reporters holding high-end cameras with flashing lenses. Brody Vance was in the center of the main ring, shirtless, his muscular body glistening with sweat as he performed a flashy, high-speed sparring demonstration for a live media broadcast. His movements were explosive, every punch throwing a loud spray of sweat into the air as the reporters cheered and snapped photographs. Arthur and Martha walked calmly past the polished reception desk, ignored the glaring looks from the young staff members, and stopped right at the edge of the blue boxing canvas surrounding the main ring. They stood there quietly, waiting. Brody Vance spotted them immediately in the mirrored walls. He stopped his sparring session, wiped his face with a gold-embroidered towel, and walked toward the ropes, a look of utter disgust crossing his face. He looked at Arthur's old tweed suit. He looked at Martha's simple dress, and he laughed out loud, leaning over the top rope to address them. "Well, well, well," Brody shouted, his voice amplified by the gym's microphone system so that every single corner of the facility could hear him. "Look what the rain dragged in. What are you two doing here? This is a world-class training facility for elite athletes, not a senior citizen home. Are you lost, or did you come here to beg for a free meal?" The young fighters and wealthy clients around the gym burst into a chorus of loud, mocking laughter. Arthur didn't flinch. He took off his flat cap, stepped a fraction of an inch closer to the ring, and spoke in a calm, clear, and dignified voice that cut straight through the laughter. "My name is Arthur Jenkins," the old man said, looking Brody dead in the eye. "3 days ago, my grandson Malik came here to learn. He paid you $450 of his own hard-earned money. You humiliated him. You insulted his race, and you threw him out. We are here today to collect his full refund, and we expect a written apology for the way he was treated." Brody's face instantly went tight, his arrogant smile twisting into a cold, dangerous snarl. He didn't like being challenged, especially not in his own kingdom, and certainly not by an elderly black couple in front of the media, seeking to completely destroy their dignity and create a viral moment for the cameras. Brody stepped out of the ring, his heavy boots clicking loudly against the floor as he approached Arthur, crowding the old man's personal space until he was staring down at him. "A refund?" Brody sneered, his voice dropping into a vicious whisper that still carried across the silent room. "I don't give refunds to trash. Your grandkid is a coward who couldn't handle a real man's gym. He's slow, he's weak, and honestly, it's in his bloodlines. People like you aren't built for greatness. You're built to stay at the bottom." As Brody leaned in closer, his chest nearly touching Arthur's jacket, he aggressively snatched Arthur's old leather wallet right out of his hand. Arthur tried to hold on to it, but the champion's strength was too much. The wallet flew open, and a small, faded, plastic laminated piece of paper fell out, fluttering onto the dirty gym floor. It was a vintage 1976 amateur fighter registration card, the only physical piece of evidence Arthur kept from his youth, carrying the official seal of the U.S. Olympic Boxing Association. Brody looked down at the faded card, read the words, and let out a cruel, mocking bark of laughter. "What the hell is this? An old fighter card? You think you used to be somebody, old man?" Before anyone could realize what he was doing, Brody Vance raised his heavy, custom-made white leather boot and slammed it down directly on top of the vintage card. He ground his heel into the floor, tearing the old plastic, crushing the delicate paper beneath his weight, completely destroying the priceless historical divert. He left a thick, black smear of dirt across Arthur's name. "This is nothing but ghetto trash," Brody hissed, kicking the ruined piece of paper into a nearby puddle of dirty water near the mats. "Just like you, just like your grandkid, and just like your entire useless history. You want money? You want an apology? You're lucky I don't have my security guards throw you out into the rain like the stray dogs you are." The room fell into a suffocating, terrifyingly tense silence. Nobody moved. Nobody dared to breathe. The local reporters held their cameras up, capturing every single second of the brutal humiliation. Martha's hands trembled with profound sorrow as she looked at the ruined card in the puddle, her lips tightening as she looked at her husband. Arthur looked down at the black boot print covering his past, his chest rising and falling in slow, deep, and measured breaths. The injustice in the room was so thick, it felt heavy. A billionaire champion, using his immense status to completely stomp on the dignity of two elderly people who had done nothing but ask for fairness. Brody stood there, his arms crossed over his massive chest, a look of ultimate triumph on his face, fully believing he had completely broken the old couple's spirit. The silence inside the Vance Iron Boxing Academy was so thick it felt heavy, a suffocating pressure that made the large room feel small. Brody Vance looked around at his students and the reporters, feeling a surge of pure adrenaline. He could see the flash of his own phone tripod in the corner, where his digital media manager was broadcasting live to over 70,000 viewers online. This was no longer just a confrontation. To Brody, this was premium viral content. This was an opportunity to show his millions of followers across the world what happens when anyone dared to step into his kingdom and question his absolute authority. Brody gave a subtle nod to his videographer, signaling him to adjust the camera angle to frame the entire scene. "Make sure you get a good look at this, everyone." Brody spoke directly toward the blinking red light of the camera lens, his voice dripping with theater and mockery. "We've got some special visitors today. They think they can come into my elite facility and dictate terms to the world champion." He walked over to the luxury lounge area behind the main ring, where a heavy digital steel safe was built into the polished mahogany wall. With a series of fast, practiced keystrokes, the safe clicked open with a heavy metallic sound. Brody reached inside and pulled out a thick, heavy brick of tightly wrapped cashier's checks. It was exactly $100,000 in cash value, a special fund that had been prepared earlier that morning to cover the venue's upcoming international title defense promotion fees. Brody walked back toward Arthur slowly, holding the thick stack of checks right in front of the old man's face, waving it so close that the crisp edges of the paper almost brushed Arthur's nose. To ensure the humiliation was complete for the online audience, Brody snapped his fingers at his assistant near the soundboard. "Turn up the track, Marcus. Let's give our guests some appropriate background music for their departure." Within seconds, a loud, mocking song with derogatory, racially charged lyrics began to thump through the state-of-the-art speakers, filling the gym with an atmosphere of pure intimidation. The young fighters in the back began to snicker, nodding their heads to the rhythm, looking at the elderly black couple as if they were nothing more than a joke on a screen. Brody leaned in close, his breath hot against Arthur's face. "You see this, old man? This is $100,000. More money than you and your little grocery store see in an entire 5 years of selling rotten cabbage to the neighborhood. You want your grandson's $450 back? Let's make a deal. I'm a generous champ. I'll give you a real chance to change your life." He tapped the checks against Arthur's shoulder, a mocking, aggressive gesture. "Step onto this canvas right now. Put your hands up. I will stand right here, completely open. You land just one clean shot on my chin. Just one. If you can touch me, this entire $100,000 is yours. You can take it, walk out that door, and buy your kid all the cheap shirts he wants." The gym erupted into another wave of loud, raucous laughter. The reporters angled their lenses, waiting for the old man to turn around, drop his head in shame, and shuffle out into the cold rain so they could write their mocking headlines for the morning papers. Brody's eyes turned cold, his voice dropping into a dangerous, razor-sharp hiss. "But if you miss, old man, if you swing and fail, you drop to your knees right here on this camera. You look into that lens, and you admit to every single person watching across the country that your whole black bloodline is weak, slow, and completely inferior to men like me. You admit that you're nothing but ghetto trash. What do you say, old lady? You think your man has enough juice left in his old bones to hit the champ?" Martha didn't look at Brody. She kept her eyes fixed on Arthur. The room stood completely frozen, waiting for the inevitable surrender. The psychological trap was perfect. Brody had used his wealth, his physical dominance, and his massive media platform to corner an elderly couple, leaving them with no choice but to face complete, public destruction of their dignity. But as the mocking music continued to thump against the mirrors, Arthur Jenkins slowly closed his eyes. He took a long, deep, and steady breath, absorbing the weight of the insult, transforming the decades of quiet patience into a cold, unbreakable resolve. He looked at his wife, and in that silent, profound exchange of glances, a lifetime of understanding passed between them. The thumping music seemed to fade into a distant hum as Arthur Jenkins slowly reached up with his large, calloused right hand. He took off his gray tweed flat cap, revealing his short, neat silver hair. He folded the cap carefully and handed it to Martha, his movements unhurried, almost serene. Then, with a casual, smooth motion of his left arm, he looked down at his wrist. There, resting against his dark, wrinkled skin, was a high-tech Apple Watch Ultra 2, its bright digital screen glowing with an active fitness tracking ring. It was a bizarre, completely contradictory detail. An elderly, impoverished store owner wearing a premium, state-of-the-art sports watch meant for extreme athletes. He tapped the screen calmly, turning off the heart rate monitor, and unclasped the heavy titanium band, handing the expensive watch to Martha alongside his hat. It was a highly unusual detail, an unexpected element that made a few sharp-eyed students in the back tilt their heads in confusion. But nobody dared to say a word as the old man turned back toward the ring. Arthur stepped over the lowest rope, his heavy leather Sunday shoes stepping onto the bright blue canvas of the boxing ring. The moment his feet touched the material, something extraordinary happened. The slight curve in his spine vanished. His shoulders squared, his chest expanded, and his chin tucked down into his collarbone with a geometric precision that could only be forged by thousands of hours of professional repetition. Outside the ring, Martha didn't cry out or try to stop him. Instead, she took 3 steps to her left, aligning herself perfectly with the corner of the canvas. Her own feet shifted into a subtle 45-degree angle, her weight dropping low, her eyes locking onto Brody Vance's upper torso. She was no longer just a grandmother in a Sunday dress. She had instantly transformed into a master corner strategist, her entire body synchronizing with Arthur's movements in a silent, telepathic language of combat. Brody Vance didn't notice any of this. He laughed out loud, throwing his arms wide open, completely exposed, presenting his chin to the old man like a target. "Come on, old man. Show the world what that welfare strength looks like. Give me your best shot." But in the far corner of the gym, standing near the water coolers, was Coach Ray Higgins. Ray was 68 years old, a veteran trainer who had spent 50 years in the boxing world, having trained 3 world champions and witnessed the greatest eras of the sport. He had been watching the scene with quiet discomfort, but the moment Arthur shifted his weight, Ray's eyes locked onto the old man's feet. Arthur's left foot slid forward by exactly 2 inches. His right heel rose a fraction of a millimeter off the canvas, his weight distributing itself with a flawless, liquid-smooth balance. It was a highly specific, lightning-fast weight distribution adjustment known in the golden era of boxing as the Savannah Pivot, a legendary, long-lost footwork technique that allowed a fighter to generate immense counterpower while remaining completely invisible to an opponent's line of sight. Coach Ray Higgins froze. His face went entirely pale, the color draining from his skin until he looked like a ghost. His hands began to tremble so violently that the plastic clipboard he was holding slipped from his fingers, crashing to the hardwood floor with a loud clattering bang that echoed through the silent gym. His mouth opened, but for 3 seconds, no sound came out. He looked from the feet up to Arthur's face, tracing the sharp, cold angle of the old man's jaw beneath the silver stubble. The memories hit Ray like a physical blow. 1978, the Madison Square Garden. The phantom fighter who had destroyed every contender with a single step before a corrupt, racially biased committee stripped his license overnight. "Brody," Ray suddenly screamed, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror as he sprinted toward the ring, his old legs moving faster than they had in decades. "Brody, stop! Get out of the ring! Get out of the ring right now!" Brody Vance didn't even turn his head. He kept his arrogant smile fixed on Arthur, waving his hand dismissively at his trainer. Relax, Ray. It's just an old man trying to play hero for his grandkid. Watch me put him in his place. You idiot, Ray roared, his voice echoing off the walls, causing several reporters to lower their cameras in absolute shock. Look at his feet. Look at his footwork. You don't know who that is. Brody, I'm telling you, move away from him right now. But the champion's arrogance was a fortress that no warning could penetrate. Brody stepped forward, his left hand dropping completely, leaving his face wide open, fully convinced that the old man before him was nothing more than an easy target for his next viral video. Brody Vance completely ignored his veteran trainer's frantic screams. To a man who possessed youth, millions of dollars, and a pristine championship belt, the warning of an old coach sounded like nothing more than senile paranoia. Brody looked down at Arthur, his cold blue eyes locking onto the old man's silver hair, his mouth twisting into a final vicious sneer. Time's up, old man, Brody hissed, his voice carrying directly into the live stream microphone. Let's see if your dark skin can absorb a real champion's power. With a sudden, explosive burst of speed, Brody unleashed a lightning-fast left jab straight toward Arthur's face. It was a punch designed to blind and disorient, thrown with the full velocity of a reigning world champion. The reporters gasped, their fingers tightening on their camera shutters, expecting to see the elderly man's head snap back, his body crashing to the canvas in a bloody, humiliating heap. But Arthur Jenkins didn't move backward. He didn't flinch. The exact moment Brody's knuckles were about to touch his nose, Arthur executed the precise footwork Ray Higgins had recognized. His left hip rotated inward by a fraction of an inch, his weight transferring instantly to his back leg through the Savannah pivot. It was a movement so minimal, so textbook clean, that it looked as if he hadn't moved at all. Brody's massive leather glove sailed past Arthur's left ear, missing his skin by less than a millimeter. The sheer force of the missed punch created a sharp, distinct whoosh of wind that ruffled Arthur's silver hair. Because Brody had thrown the punch with full power, expecting solid contact, hitting nothing but empty air completely destroyed his center of gravity. His massive 210-pound frame stumbled forward, his upper body tilting dangerously off balance as his boots slid across the smooth blue canvas. The entire gym went dead silent. The mocking music thumping from the speakers suddenly felt incredibly out of place, an ironic soundtrack to a moment that defied all logic. The wealthy clients stopped stretching, the young fighters dropped their jaws, and the reporters forgot to snap their pictures. Brody caught himself on the ropes, his face turning a deep, furious shade of crimson. He spun around, his breathing suddenly heavy, his eyes wide with a mixture of intense confusion and burning humiliation. He looked at Arthur, who was standing in the exact same spot, his hands still relaxed at his sides, his breathing perfectly slow and measured. Lucky, Brody growled, his voice trembling with rage as he spat on the canvas, his arrogant performance completely dropping away. That was nothing but a lucky slip, you old bastard. You think you can play games with me? Outside the ring, Coach Ray Higgins reached the apron, his hands gripping the ropes so tightly his knuckles turned white. He looked directly at Brody, his voice shaking with a profound, historical reverence. It's not luck, Brody. You're standing in the ring with Arthur, the Ghost Jenkins, the undefeated 1,976 Olympic gold medalist, the man whose career was stolen by the commission in '78 because they couldn't find a white fighter who could touch him. The man who never lost a single professional bout. You're standing in the ring with a god, you idiot? A collective murmur rippled through the gallery of reporters. Two of the older sports writers suddenly gasped, their eyes widening as they looked at the old man's face, realizing the incredible truth of Ray's words. The connection was made instantly. The legendary fighter who had vanished into the shadows of history 48 years ago, leaving behind a legacy that boxing purists still talked about in hushed tones, was standing right in front of them in a simple Sunday suit. Arthur didn't acknowledge the reporters or his past name. He simply kept his eyes locked onto Brody, his posture shifting into a classic low-profile stance, his left hand coming up to shield his ribs, his right hand anchoring near his chin. He was no longer a quiet grocery store owner. The phantom of 1978 had returned to the ring, driven by the purest motivation a human being could possess, the defense of his family's sacred dignity. The revelation of Arthur's true identity did nothing to tame the raging beast inside Brody Vance. Instead, hearing that this 68-year-old black man was a legendary, undefeated Olympic icon from a bygone era only made the champion's blood boil with a toxic mixture of envy and deep humiliation. To Brody, a man whose entire reality was built on social media numbers, physical intimidation, and the delusion of his own absolute superiority, the idea that a quiet neighborhood grocery store owner could overshadow his star power was completely unacceptable. He could feel the eyes of his students, the reporters, and the tens of thousands of viewers on the live stream staring at him, waiting to see if the world champion would actually be humiliated by a senior citizen. "I don't care who he used to be 40 years ago," Brody screamed, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated fury as he threw his gold-embroidered towel over the ropes, completely ignoring Coach Ray Higgins's desperate pleas to step away. "This is my ring. This is my era. I am the executioner, and I am going to put this old ghost to sleep permanently." Brody bounced heavily on his toes, his massive chest heaving as he closed the distance between them, his eyes locked onto Arthur's chin. He didn't offer a light-hearted gesture or a standard boxing probe this time. He came in with the terrifying velocity of a man trying to commit a crime on live television. Brody unleashed a brutal, full-power right hook, a devastating punch that had knocked out 15 professional contenders throughout his career. The punch was aimed directly at the side of Arthur's jaw, thrown with enough force to shatter bone and cause severe, permanent damage. But Arthur Jenkins did not move with the fragile, hesitant panic of an old man. The moment Brody's shoulder rotated to launch the blow, Arthur's body responded with the flawless, liquid-smooth muscle memory of a true master. It was a physical discipline that had been buried in the dark attic of his mind for nearly half a century, but it had never truly disappeared. It had simply been waiting for a reason to awaken. With a motion so fast it appeared almost invisible to the naked eye, Arthur ducked his head beneath the path of the swinging fist. His knees bent slightly, his torso slipping underneath Brody's extended right arm with total geometric precision. Brody's heavy glove sliced through the empty air, the sheer momentum of his own missing punch pulling his defensive guard wide open. Arthur did not hesitate. Moving inside Brody's wide, exposed guard, the old man pivoted his left foot by exactly 90 degrees, the final, devastating application of the Savannah pivot. He anchored his weight into the canvas, and with a short, compact, and explosive motion, Arthur delivered a textbook left hook directly into Brody's liver. The sound of the impact was terrifyingly distinct. It was not a dull thud or a wet slap. It was a deep, compressed pop, like a heavy leather sandbag being dropped from a great height. The massive, rock-hard abdominal muscles that Brody spent millions of dollars to maintain offered absolutely no protection against a perfectly placed, professional liver shot. Brody's lungs instantly emptied of all oxygen. His eyes widened into circles of sheer shock, his mouth opening wide as a long, desperate gasp of air escaped his throat. Before the champion's brain could even process the agonizing pain paralyzing his central nervous system, Arthur's right foot planted firmly into the canvas. He rotated his hips with a terrifying liquid power, unleashing a short, blinding right cross that connected flush with the point of Brody's chin. The impact cracked through the silent gym like a sudden gunshot. The physical reality of the universe seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. Brody Vance's knees instantly went soft, buckling beneath his 210-pound frame. His arms dropped loosely to his sides, his eyes rolling back into his head as his consciousness vanished completely. The reigning middleweight champion of the world toppled forward, his massive body crashing face-first onto the blue canvas with a heavy, unglamorous thud that rattled the water bottles sitting on the reception counter 20 feet away. Brody lay there completely motionless, his face pressed against the blue material, blood beginning to trickle from his nose onto the gym logo. The room fell into an absolute, suffocating silence. Nobody dared to breathe. The young fighters stood frozen like statues, their hands glued to their heads, their faces completely white with shock. The local reporters stood with their fingers frozen on their camera buttons, staring at the canvas in total disbelief. A reigning, undefeated world champion had just been thoroughly knocked out in under 5 seconds by a 68-year-old grandfather wearing a pressed gray Sunday suit. Arthur Jenkins stood over the fallen champion for a brief moment, his breathing calm, his hands lowering slowly back to his sides, his dignity completely intact, as he looked down at the man who had called his bloodline weak. The state-of-the-art live stream equipment in the corner of the gym was still running, its blinking red light capturing every single detail of the unbelievable scene. Because Brody Vance had demanded the live broadcast remain active to humiliate the elderly black couple online, over 94,000 viewers across the United States had just witnessed the world champion get knocked, completely unconscious, by a single counter combination from an old man in a Sunday suit. Before Brody's digital media team could shake off their paralyzing shock and pull the power cords from the wall, the clip had already been recorded, saved, and distributed across thousands of independent servers. The truth was out, and there was absolutely no way to alter the narrative. Within minutes, the internet exploded into a roaring digital wildfire. The video surged across TikTok, X, and YouTube under the trending hashtag number #TheGhostOfSavannah. By 6 p.m., the clip had gathered over 11 million views, making it the fastest-growing viral video in the state's modern history. Inside the gym, the silence was broken not by celebration, but by a profound act of historical accountability. Coach Ray Higgins slowly stepped over the ropes, his eyes glistening with old tears as he walked toward the center of the ring. He completely ignored his unconscious fighter lying face first on the canvas. Instead, Ray stopped 2 feet away from Arthur Jenkins, took off his own coaching cap, and dropped down onto both knees before the elderly man. "I am so sorry, Arthur," Ray whispered, his voice cracking with deep emotion as the reporters crowded around the ring, their microphones thrust forward to catch every word. "I am sorry for what this gym did to your grandson, and I am sorry for what the Boxing Commission did to you in 1978. They tried to erase your name from the history books because they couldn't handle a black champion with your level of genius. But today, the whole world saw the truth. You are, and always will be, the greatest to ever lace up a pair of gloves." The older reporters in the room began nodding their heads, their faces filled with a sudden, reverent realization as they began typing frantically on their tablets, transforming what was supposed to be a mockery into an official historical restoration. 30 minutes later, Brody Vance finally began to groan, his eyelids fluttering open as paramedics pressed smelling salts beneath his nose. He was rolled over onto his back, his face swollen, his nose clearly broken, his limbs trembling violently as he tried to figure out where he was. He looked up through the glare of the bright gym lights and saw the local news reporters staring down at him, not with admiration, but with cold, professional scrutiny. Mr. Vance, a prominent sports anchor from a local television station, called out, holding a microphone inches from the champion's bruised face. "The unedited live stream shows you using severe racial slurs against this family, destroying an official Olympic artifact, and demanding a physical altercation under a $100,000 wager. Do you have a statement regarding the immediate suspension of your boxing license?" Brody tried to speak, his jaw clicking painfully from the right cross, but no coherent words came out. His arrogant performance had completely collapsed, leaving behind nothing but a broken, humiliated bully who had been utterly exposed by the very media machine he used to control. The consequences of his cruelty were immediate, total, and completely merciless. By 9:00 p.m. that evening, Global Athletics Corp., the multi-billion-dollar international athletic brand that provided Brody with 80% of his income through corporate sponsorships, released a brief devastating two-sentence public statement on their official website. We do not align our brand with individuals whose conduct promotes racial discrimination, public endangerment, or harassment. Our corporate relationship with Mr. Brody Vance is terminated effective immediately. Before midnight, the World Boxing Sanctioning Committee issued an emergency press release, officially stripping Brody Vance of his middleweight championship belt and suspending his professional fighting license indefinitely, pending a full state athletic commission investigation into public endangerment and civil rights. Violation. The luxury sports cars, the multi-million-dollar billboards, and the worshipful adoration of the fighting world vanished into thin air in less than 6 hours, all because a bully had chosen to target a family whose inner strength he could never comprehend. Arthur and Martha didn't stay to watch the champion crumble. They simply walked out of the luxury facility, their heads held high as they stepped back into the cool Georgia rain, leaving the chaos behind them. The morning sun broke beautifully through the gray clouds over Savannah, casting a warm, golden light across the weathered wooden porch of Jenkins Corner Provisions. The neighborhood grocery store, which had been a quiet, invisible fixture in the community for 40 years, was suddenly surrounded by a peaceful, celebratory crowd of hundreds of local residents, neighbors, and young children, holding handmade signs that read, "Welcome Home, Champion." Following the legal intervention of a civil rights group that had watched the viral live stream, the state bank officially executed the transfer of the $100,000 wager that Brody Vance had legally committed to on live television. Arthur and Martha Jenkins refused to keep a single penny of the money for themselves. They did not buy a new pickup truck, nor did they renovate their modest home. Instead, they donated the entire $100,000 to the Savannah Youth Development Foundation to completely rebuild the dilapidated community center down the street. 6 weeks later, the newly renovated facility opened its doors under a beautiful, hand-painted wooden sign, the Arthur and Martha Jenkins Youth Boxing and Mentorship Center. Inside, the air was filled with the beautiful, energetic sounds of heavy bags swinging, speed bags snapping, and the laughter of dozens of neighborhood children who had previously had no safe place to spend their afternoons. The facility was completely free of charge, open to any young person who had ever been told they didn't belong, or whose spirit had been crushed by the harsh realities of the world. Malik walked through the doors of the new center, his head held high, his posture straight and proud. He was no longer wearing the stained red shirt from the Vance Academy. Instead, he wore a beautiful, clean white training uniform with the official logo of his grandfather's Olympic legacy stitched over his heart. He stepped onto the brand new, immaculate canvas ring, acting as the head assistant coach for a class of 30 young kids from the neighborhood, teaching them how to stand, how to breathe, and how to find their inner strength. On the main back wall of the gym, mounted inside a beautiful, custom-made glass display frame, hung the 2 pairs of cracked leather boxing shoes from the late 1970s, alongside the faded red silk boxing trunks with the letters USA. Beside the frame sat the old cedar trunk from the attic, its heavy lid now left completely open, its decades of dark silence finally transformed into a permanent beacon of hope and dignity for generations to come. As for Brody Vance, the luxury Vance Iron Boxing Academy lost its commercial property lease within 30 days as the building's owners sought to distance themselves from the public scandal. Brody was forced to sell his luxury vehicles to cover the legal fees of 3 separate civil lawsuits filed against him for discrimination and emotional distress. He went from a local celebrity to a profound cautionary tale, a man who learned too late that real power is not measured by a plastic championship belt or a bank account, but by the way you treat the most vulnerable human beings around you. Late that evening, after the last youth boxing class had ended and the kids had walked home to their families, Arthur and Martha Jenkins stood together near the front counter of their quiet little grocery store. The store smelled of fresh apples, brown paper bags, and old wood. Arthur reached into his pocket and pulled out his Apple Watch Ultra 2, placing it gently on the wooden counter next to his flat cap. He looked at Martha, a soft, peaceful smile finally breaking through his wrinkled face, his large, calloused hand reaching out to fold over hers. They had stood up against the darkest forces of arrogance and bigotry, not with hatred, but with the undeniable weight of their own truth, proving to the entire world that a person's true human dignity can never be bought, sold, or intimidated by anyone. This powerful story reminds us that true human dignity is an internal fortress that no amount of wealth, status, or arrogance can ever diminish. True strength does not belong to those who use their position to make others feel small. It belongs to those who carry silent courage in their hearts, waiting for the perfect moment to stand up for the people they love. My friends, if this inspiring story of hidden legends and ultimate justice touched your heart today, please take a quick moment to leave a thoughtful comment below, sharing your own reflections. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And subscribe to our channel to make sure you never miss another profound human journey. Thank you for watching, and remember to always hold your head high.